This is a binder attachment, and the binder is a wonderful way to create professional looking finishes on your garment. For instance, if you want to add binding to your neckline, sleeve openings, pockets, there are lots of different uses for this attachment. However, it does come with a bit of a learning curve, which is the reason why I made this video, so that you can learn from my mistakes and lots of other experience in order to really take your binding to the next level. And what are a suitable fabric for sewing binding? Well, it should be fairly lightweight, stable, but still has good stretch, and ideally it should not curl. A thin interlock knit is an ideal material for binding because it checks all these boxes, and a thin rib knit can also be a great option. And of course, sometimes you want to use other type of fabric, perhaps the same type of fabric as the garment that you're sewing. This can work too, but it can also be a little bit trickier. So if you're new to sewing binding, I do recommend that you start with using interlock and rib knit fabrics. But if you still want to use thick binding, I recommend that you try one of those binding methods that I show in my book Master the Coverstitch Machine, because there I also have tutorials for binding that doesn't require an attachment. So I definitely recommend you check out that book. Links will of course be in the description section of this video. Have the right and left needle stitching over the same amount of fabric layers. And why, you may ask? Well, this can prevent skip stitches and ensure even feeding and tension. I highly recommend that you use a holder for the binding strip. All you need is a toilet roll and a paper towel roll. And this little simple trick will prevent the binding strips from collapsing or getting stuck into the guides. And the binder holder I'm showing here in this video is from Erikas Syskrin, and that's a fabulous product that you will find more information about in the description section of this video. Are you having problems such as skip stitches, uneven feeding or tension issues? Then I recommend that you download my free cover stitch troubleshooting guide. Links to that guide is of course in the description section. Pulling the binding during sewing can cause skip stitches, which is so annoying. So instead, what you should do is gently guide the binding with your hands and let the machine do the feeding. There should be no need for you to do any pulling if you have set everything up properly. For better feeding, I do recommend that you increase the stitch length a little bit. You can also experiment with the differential feed. Start by trying to reduce it, and you can also try to reduce the pressure foot pressure, but be prepared to experiment because different fabrics will require different settings. So sometimes it might be helpful to increase the differential feed, and sometimes it might help to increase the pressure foot pressure, because you do need to experiment, and once you figure something out, do note them down so you have them next time you're sewing something similar. You should always stitch over just the binding for at least 5 centimeters, which is around 2 inches, before you're inserting the fabric into the folded binding. Because if you do this, this will help stitches to form properly, and it will also give you an idea if the settings are actually working before you start sewing the garment. Sometimes it can be hard to get the binding to stay straight when you're sewing. And the first thing you should do is to place the attachment close to the presser foot, because if you keep that distance fairly short, that will also ensure that the binding will stay straighter. Another tip is to tape the binder plate if you find that it's slipping and not staying quite still during the binding process. And finally, remember to practice and to do test samples. Because sewing great binding is a skill that will take practice and experimentation to figure out what works best for your particular machine and project. So make the habit of being really meticulous with both the settings and the placement, and once you have figured out the best configuration, document them. Remember that every time you use a different fabric, you will likely have to change the settings somewhat.